ちゃごちゃうるせえ。ここまで来たら言葉じゃねえだろ。領域展開。
Because I'm still waiting for you to click that like button and to subscribe and the post notification button.
With the conclusion of Jujutsu Kaisen Season 3 finally happening, I think that it's an opportunity for us to actually reflect on what this season did. Because coming from Season 2, a lot of us had questions about what this season could do that would be totally different compared to what Season 2 did. And if you really think about it, Season 2 might have been the season that defined Jujutsu Kaisen, blew it up and basically made it a household name. So the question was, what was it gonna do to one-up itself in a sense? And the interesting thing about this season is that even though it didn't necessarily hit the same heights of Season 2, I think that it approached its third season in such a unique way that it actually might be better than Season 2. Now, before I begin talking about why I think it's better than Season 2, I need to give you the premise of the anime. It's Jujutsu Kaisen. There you go. Now, in terms of this season, what was the most unique thing that I noticed? Well, in terms of the beginning of the season, it begins with action. Now, it was very clear that this season wanted to keep on that vibe of danger and a lot of energy towards fighting. Arguably speaking, the first few episodes were so jam-packed with action that it felt as though we really hadn't come from a hiatus or a break recently. And this was really exceptional because, to be honest, this season had a lot of amazing fights. Not necessarily to the heights of last season, but the fights in themselves were beautiful. Because arguably speaking, this was one of the few seasons where people actually cared who the director was when there was a rumor that he might be leaving, which I think is actually true. People cared that much, but it showed you just how good the action was. Now, I don't think that this season had the so-called big name fights that people liked, but I think that just in terms of the fights that did happen, they were really fascinating to watch, and I think that we had a lot of moments from a person like Maki to an individual like Yuji fighting Higuruma. There were a few interesting fights that were done in a very interesting way, with the most recent being Reiji and Megumi. It was spectacular, and I think that the fights really had a different vibe to them. We saw people get outsmarted, we saw people just get outpowered, we saw a lot of different ways to go about fights and really explore the world of sorcery, showing us that it's not always this sort of simple thing that the strongest person will win, but sometimes it's really about capitalizing within the moment and then defeating that person, even though that person might be stronger than you. And as such, this season had a different vibe from last season. A lot of the fights had this element of just one-upping someone, and I think that it added this extra element of fatality to each of the fights, because you kind of saw this element of if you make one mistake, it could be the end. And for me, this is something that was really cool within this season, and I think that a lot of people appreciated it because every single week when a cool fight would happen, people would highlight just how unique it was, which is a really good thing because it shows that Jujutsu Kaisen has a very extensive bag in terms of how they can display fights within the anime, which is amazing. But also the fact that this anime had this ability of really just showing you fights that really might just relate to real life. Like, these people are just outsmarting each other in a way that almost seems too realistic, and it's really comedic until a person like Takaba shows up and he takes it to another level. But this season really just had a diverse bag of fights that really kept you thinking and kind of just having fun. As such, in terms of the fight element, Jujutsu Kaisen Season 3 really fulfilled what the fans might have wanted. This is something that I think is just enough for this anime to just be classified as a good season, because it delivered on a lot of things that it was supposed to. But this is where things get a bit different. In terms of this season, that made it really unique from my perspective was how they approached certain conversations, because this season was maybe the more intellectual season so far. Because what we noticed within this season is that there was a really diverse jump into the world of sorcery and how it really works and how people think. We saw that once Gojo was gone, a lot of people started betraying each other, a lot of darkness started to happen, and it really just showed you how nasty the world of sorcery was. And arguably the most biggest climax of it was Maki against the Zenin clan, a moment where this person finally gains the power to fight against her clan, and it's an all-out beautiful moment that paid homage to a lot of things like Kill Bill, which was beautiful. Ultimately, it showed us a moment of people rebelling against the system of sorcery, because this season really showed us just how messed up the world really is and how a person like Gojo is really important. And this sort of of unbalanced feeling throughout this entire season. It felt really invigorating because it wasn't your usual Jujutsu Kaisen vibe that Gojo would arrive. These characters have to figure things out for themselves, and sometimes they succeeded and sometimes they failed. And as such, we lost a few interesting characters that left a lot of people in pain. But the other thing that I also enjoyed was just how they kind of approached the mentality of these characters, because there are so many examples that you can discuss where mentality is really a thing. Like for example, the fight with Megumi and Reggie. Reggie begins the conversation with Megumi talking about how sorcerers are deceitful, and ultimately he loses his life because Megumi actually deceived him, which is like kind of crazy. But then in terms of just also the interaction of Higuruma was a person who believed in justice but did not believe within the system because it failed him many times, and he realized that it was corrupt. Until then, he meets a person like Yuji who finally allows him to realize that his thoughts once he gained the power is no different than the people he just unalived. And this season had so many different aspects. Again, I noted Maki and just how she got back at a family that was just messed up. But the thing that I really liked overall within the season, that I want to bunch sort of these situations together, specifically Maki and Higuruma's moment, is that this season really dived into the conversation of power. Once these characters were finally able to gain the power to fight back, they changed. You would have thought that most time within an anime, once someone gains the power, they will keep on doing good things. Not necessarily, because what Maki did, even though her clan was wrong, is wrong in itself. She basically just unalived a bunch of people. Even though a lot of them were in the wrong, it makes her no different from them, because she's willing to unalive someone for her goal, and they're willing to do the same thing. In fact, they were willing to sacrifice her. But then if you think about it, she sacrificed them for a greater cause that she believes in. So it really is a conversation about beliefs for both sides. It just so happens that Maki was stronger and she got away. This is a conversation that can be applied also to Toji, because he was set free from the clan because he was just that strong. Then let's go talk about Higuruma. Once again, a person who deals with corruption, and he was just upset with what was happening. So then he decides once he gains the power that he's gonna get rid of everyone there. And if you think about it, it's only when he's exposed to someone like Yuji who's really pure and kind of has this sort of approach that Higuruma once had, or just believed that he lost because of how flawed and how corrupted he eventually became. You saw that he kind of viewed his power in a different way, and in actuality he couldn't even face Yuji. But if you look at his moment, he finally gained the power to make a change or a difference, but he started doing a lot of crazy things. He wouldn't even listen to what Yuji had to say. He believed that he knows the path now and he's gonna do what he has to do, even if it results in people losing their lives, which is wrong. And I think that these two characters were used within the season to really just dive into the conversation of people who feel like they're in a corner, finally gaining that power and seeing just how nasty it can become. Not everything is as beautiful as what we think it will be once you gain the opportunity to fight back. Some of these fights were graphic, and I think that the reason they were like this was just to show you what can happen when the so-called person who was going through this tough time finally gets the one-up on people, and just how hard they can be. And these two characters, who were seen initially as people who were trying to do the right thing, end up being two of the most vicious characters. Now, before Higuruma meets Yuji, Higuruma had unalived a bunch of other people before then. That's how he got a lot of points. So this person who was once a lawyer fighting to save people's lives was starting to take them. And I think that the beauty within his technique, that he's basically the judge, jury, and executioner, is kind of self-explanatory in a weird way, but it shows you just how skewed things have become once he gains power. And this was a very beautiful thing, because I don't think a lot of people went into season 3 or just Jujutsu Kaisen expecting themselves to get this sort of philosophical lesson about many things, but it did. In fact, this entire season was filled with a lot of philosophy that you could apply and really think about, which really added a layer to this anime that some people have said that it doesn't have. But also for the fans, it allowed us to really digest this world more, understand how people think, but also just show us the darkness of both sides. Even the people that we like Megumi, is a person who was willing to just unalive a lady. His sister mentally intervened. She didn't actually, he thought about it and he stopped. But also he unalived other people. And this season really showed us this darkness about philosophy and how it can be twisted. We thought that these are good people, but they're having to do a lot of dire and dark things for the greater good. And I think that this really creates this concept of what it takes to exist within the world of sorcery. There's a lot of deception, there's a lot of misuse of power, but also there's a lot of overlooking morals in a lot of the things that these people do, it really just ended up being this season that really fixated on survival more than anything because of what happened. And I don't think that people jumped into the season expecting to be approached by Jujutsu Kaisen in this way, which is what for me made this season so astonishing and so different, because this was something I did not expect, but it added a layer to this anime that I think made it better. Yes, the fights were there, but it was able to actually add a layer to the fights that really had you thinking. And I think that this was extremely profound because it stayed within its own lane, but excelled to another level. And this is why I think that this season was so special and so different. I found myself really thinking more about the philosophy and the morals and the thoughts of the characters more than ever. And I think that I really didn't care too much about the fights, but more in the fact that they were just kind of an ends to a means. They kind of allowed us to see something and learn something through fights, but it was deeper than that. Now, to be fair, do I think that this is a perfect season? No, I do think that this anime is flawed in some aspects. To be fair with you, I do think that there were some episodes that were not the best, and in my opinion, I think the biggest flaw this season had was the moments where, like, it's a joke now, but the moments where the narrator would read information and the information was all over the screen and you couldn't see it, and it really made like trying to learn hard, especially when they were breaking down the rules or just narrating certain fights. There would be moments where the subtitles, now I don't understand Japanese, I'm sorry, but there'd be moments where like I'm trying to read what the narrator's saying, but then the characters are saying something, but then there's information on the screen. It was just information overload, and I do think that from a technical level they should have approached that a bit better. It's a little too much, and I think that really that's the most biggest issue I noticed from this season. There could be more, but I really think that those were the ones that made me kind of jump out the experience more than the other ones, and that's the most biggest one. But the community just ended up making this a joke, which is good in a sense, but it is a negative, and that's really the most biggest negative that I have in mind. There was nothing else that I felt was that noteworthy to talk about. Overall with this season, I think in terms of animation, it's the best. I don't think that there was any anime that had better animation than it. I thought maybe Fate could, but there were moments where Fate kind of dropped a bit, but I think that it was just in a class of its own. They were very unique, the colors, everything was just fabulous. In terms of the OSTs, I think it was perfect. I think a lot of the music was able to create this ambiance, and I like that techno music or that upbeat techno type of music they play. It really just builds this level of anxiety within a lot of fights and just gets you kind of on edge. I like that, and I think that that was a very unique touch to the anime because it was something that made the anime unique, and it ended up being a meme and joke that a lot of people do because it's like a JJK moment now. So it did an amazing job in terms of the music. The opening is amazing, the ending is also amazing. The fact that they kind of contrast each other is amazing as well, and it's kind of fun. I think the writing was like the most strongest part of this season. So overall, I had an amazing time with this anime, and I think a lot of people had an amazing time with this anime. So much so that I think a lot of people are excited to see what's going to happen in the next season, but with a different perspective. We're here to see a lot of awesome fights, but we're also there for the emotional and the mental aspects of this anime more and more because of what it taught us with this season. And I think that that's a really good thing that this anime has done. It's educating us, it's making us smarter, but it's allowing us to enjoy the anime in a different light. And I think that that's amazing. And this is one of the reasons why I think that this anime did an amazing job of approaching its third season in a way that was unique, but also really stayed true to itself.